Hello everybody, this is Bitcoin Macro, and on this video guys I'm going to talk about Bitcoin forks. And overall I'm just going to do the price analysis. I'm going to give you some fundamental information on these coins, and you might be thinking, why am I starting with Litecoin and why would that be a Bitcoin fork? Well, first of all, what I mean with a fork is just any fork, not just hard forks like Bitcoin Cash. Now of course I'm just going to go through Litecoin first and then go through the rest of the coins like Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV and all that stuff. But I wanted to mention Litecoin because it's one of the main old coins that have remained around. Many people thought, myself included, that maybe eventually that would have become the rock of crypto that would never pump again. But the cycles just keep on playing out, and they just keep on playing out perfectly. Now this time around, Litecoin was the one that held very nicely during, let's say, the bear market, because it didn't dump as much as most of the other coins, okay? So that top actually came because of a pretty weird fork back on that day. I think it was Litecoin Cash. So it dropped only 87% versus Bitcoin. It just had a full cycle. And up until now, it hadn't really had a main catalyst for a major pump. However, if you may have already noticed, it has started going up essentially in March. And that was exactly when it started going up back in 2017. Now, back then, the catalyst was SegWit. So SegWit was going to be added on Litecoin, but not on Bitcoin initially because miners were actually blocking it. They had a different activation mechanism. And this time around, Litecoin, the main stuff that it actually has is potentially the addition of Mimblewimble on its code base and actually being used on mainnet through extension blocks, which is something that's pretty major. Now, I've also talked about Litecoin before, so you can go watch my previous stuff on Litecoin. But the main thing I want to talk about now is the PayPal effect, okay? So Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash have been added on PayPal, and I think these are, at least PayPal is a major source of liquidity because a lot of newbies might buy the first cryptos through PayPal. And that could mean that we get a very, very big rally on Litecoin as well, because we saw a massive capitulation, and this chop in this area, the fact that it stayed around this area for so long, is definitely a big plus for Litecoin, because look at how long it took for this to drift into this support area right here. And maybe somebody could even call this, let's say, let's call it like a channel, like a wedge. You can call it whatever you want depending on where you want to take that line from, okay? So you could see this just as a wedge, and at the same time it's breaking above a key resistance area right here, and potentially even right here, because if we take this as our previous support line that turned it into resistance right here, now that this has broken and we are above this area, now this is a full bullish trend, guys, okay? Because you're clearly making higher highs, higher and higher lows. We've broken all the diagonals, the key diagonals from here at least. Now maybe somebody says, but what about this one? Yes, of course, we do have this one here as well, but in my opinion, eventually we're gonna break out higher. But before that, maybe the price does chop up a little bit in this area right here. I'm not 100% sure, but you know, usually so far, whenever really old coins have started pumping, from BCH to, let's say, EOS to, like, you know, all the stuff that many people consider trash, have been doing well. So every time that this has been happening, it usually means that there is a correction coming. Maybe this time is different, but I'm just letting you know, guys, that first we might get a correction and then go higher, okay? The key takeaway in this thing is that we are in a bullish trend now. Maybe this might be a little hard to break because it's a bit of a more important support, but I do believe that this is a pretty important point, and the trend is quite bullish right now for Litecoin, especially after having that nice full cycle versus Bitcoin. Now Litecoin is one of those coins that has been trending lower and lower versus Bitcoin but maybe that trend starts to reverse now. Okay, I don't know how high will it go, but the fact that it is on PayPal, it is a major coin, there is a grayscale product and all that, might mean Litecoin has way more to grow, especially as high fees on Bitcoin turn some people off. Okay, the same way high fees turn people off on Ethereum and people start getting on other chains. Maybe the same thing happens with Bitcoin and Litecoin and some of the forks. Now, of course, Ethereum and all that stuff have had way more attention. People consider them way more useful, and I actually agree. I don't really see the point of Litecoin or Bitcoin Cash. I do kind of see them all as a bit of scams, like all these forks. But if people like to trade them, I like to trade them occasionally. And if they get all that liquidity, all that attention from PayPal, let's say even Venmo, now if PayPal also gets in Europe, that's a really, really major liquidity source for all these coins. So the people that have access to these services might just double a little bit on these coins, which just could ignite a big fire for those ones. Okay, now let's go into Bitcoin Cash afterwards and just talk a little bit about that. Now, Litecoin is it's not a soft fork, it's just a normal fork. Okay, it's just a fork of the code base and not the history of the coin. Whereas Bitcoin Cash is actually a fork of the code base and the history of the coin. So they took the UTXO, the unspent transaction outputs, the whole set, and they created this coin. So everyone that had Bitcoin got one Bitcoin Cash. Now there have been other hard forks, there were many of them, but the ones that are still around and they're still trading are Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Gold, and Bitcoin Diamond, at least the ones that are on Binance as well. I don't know if there are any others, but for example, Bitcoin SV is a fork of Bitcoin Cash, not a hard fork of Bitcoin Cash, not of Bitcoin itself. So it's a fork of a fork, and the same thing goes for BCHA or Bitcoin ABC or Bitcoin Cash ABC, which is a fork of Bitcoin Cash. So essentially what has happened is, and what many Bitcoiners were saying, they said you can't really fork off Bitcoin. You have to stay under the same consensus rules. First of all, for security reasons, because these chains are not as secure as Bitcoin, because the blocks would get full, it would make the cost of validating the blockchain very high, and at the same time many people wouldn't be able to download the blockchain. So overall that was a main issue, but at the same time, well, I wouldn't say that was the main issue. The main issue was that once you start changing the core protocol rather than doing a soft fork, you get all sorts of problems because everyone has to upgrade, and if somebody doesn't upgrade, then the network splits, and that makes the network less secure. So that was the main debate. It wasn't just the block size increase or how to scale, because right now we do know that scaling just on the first layer is very hard and it has lots of security risks. So there are always trade-offs. Okay, there's always like, do we go for more security, more privacy, or are we gonna go for, let's say, lower, less privacy, less security, but more throughput? But if we go for more throughput, then what's the difference with PayPal? Okay, so it's kind of ironic that BCH is on PayPal, because again, why not just use PayPal? And when I look at Bitcoin Cash, initially Bitcoin Cash had all those weird choppy action. It was going just up and down versus Bitcoin until it really broke down. That was the day that the BSV fork happened. So that was the big crash. And then since then, Bitcoin Cash hadn't really been able to recover. It dropped by about 98% versus Bitcoin from that high. And actually on some exchanges, that high had reached about 0.5 to 0.55. So overall, it did have lots of ups and downs over there. So if I can zoom in a bit, that was when it launched. Initially, it did take a dive. It had an immediate pump on Kraken on some exchanges like Bittrex back then. On some of them, it went really high. Then it dumped then pumped again late summer. Then it did have a really big dump. Then it had its mega pump. That was the biggest pump. Then it had its launch on Coinbase, where it had that massive pump, where it actually was very catastrophic for some people because they thought they're gonna buy a cheap Bitcoin on Coinbase. Coinbase really failed to disclose early on that it would launch BCH trading. Some insiders knew about it, they profited on it, and not only that, many people, where they were seeing on the screen something like 9,000 for BCH. So while the price was around 3,000, some people go actually BCH for about $5,000 to $9,000 because initially some people started placing bids. They thought they're gonna buy cheap Bitcoin. The price of BCH was around 3,000, and many got really wrecked by buying Bitcoin Cash at much higher prices. Then at some point, with all the forks, something else that many people had warned was, once you start forking, that's, it's an endless bit, because with every little disagreement, the network will split, and that was why Bitcoin chose that road, especially if you don't have a leader, like let's say Ethereum or some other project have, where they agree on what the developers say. You're gonna get constant splits all the time. So once that breakdown happened, BCH stayed below its previous lows, and it had that massive collapse. I thought that was going to be accumulation. It really failed. Like every little point turned into resistance, and then it started having that really massive capitulation. Now, the positive thing about BCH is that it has Bitmain behind it, because they have massive bags. So at some point they will try to offload them, but until that point comes, they will support BCH. Same goes for Roger Ver, who is a massive holder. Now that most of that is concentrated on really big hands, it's probably gonna do very well, especially because all the newbies are gonna run and buy it. Now again, I don't endorse any of these things. I assume that it's just purely speculative. It doesn't rely on real fundamentals. It's not because Bitcoin Cash is the real Bitcoin. That's not true. It's truly false. There's it's no way that the real Bitcoin was 100 times less valuable than the actual Bitcoin. Okay. And right now we are at this really key resistance level. At least that was the really old support versus Bitcoin, and that's why I wouldn't really want to be going long here. Now, if there is a pullback, I do believe it might be a good opportunity to buy. Even now, if it starts breaking above, maybe you can consider it, but in my opinion, it might be better to wait for a pullback and then go for longs. I would never recommend to anyone to run and buy during a pump, because where did you put your stop loss? Okay, that's a key trick question when that happens. But for example, like it happened here, this could happen again right here. So having a pullback back to the previous highs, it might be an interesting place to add something. Again, this relies on a greater full theory, where you just expect somebody who's a little bit dumber than let's say you to just buy your bags later on. But again, I do believe that because of the capitulation this has had through all its forks, BSV, BCHA, and just in general, by how much it has dropped, I do believe it could do pretty well, because again, it's one of those coins that it's pretty much on most exchanges. There is a grayscale product for it. It has some pretty big backers, and like Bitmain and Roger Ver, and it just has a nice name to it if people are looking for the next Bitcoin. Now, of course, there's a lot of education, and that's why this thing hasn't performed so well so far. But the more we progress in the bull market, more and more so-called dumb money is going to come in, so it could potentially pump it much higher. Now, the next one, guys, is BSV, which is the next largest one, and I'm going to go through these ones a little bit more quickly. Now, BSV had the same chop, although it came much later than Bitcoin Cash. Well, it shouldn't say much later, it was just a year and a few months. But of course, in crypto land, things are moving so fast that even a year looks like 10 years. It seems like eternity. So for BSV, what I would say is that this is a key resistance area. It does remind me a little bit of how Bitcoin Cash looked, but it could break out faster than BCH. Again, both of them formed massive bases that broke. Now maybe that was a trap. Maybe this has been enough of a capitulation, because they are forming some sort of round bottoms, and of course that's just the Bitcoin pair, not the USD pair. In my opinion, it does matter. It is valid. Like, this is resistance, but it might just break fairly quickly because of all the newcomers coming in. Now, of course, this is even scammier than Bitcoin Cash. At least in Bitcoin Cash, the people behind it were a little bit more legit than the fake Satoshi. These people, I think they were trying to do some sort of patterns. They were trying to profit off patents. They probably have some Bitcoins they don't have the keys of, so they're trying to explain how they got those Bitcoins, or at least eventually explain how they got those Bitcoins once they manage to have the keys. Or in general, they have been trying to profit from random schemes, from random scams. They pretended like Craig Wright pretended he's Satoshi. He's not Satoshi. Don't fall for these sort of things, guys. We don't know who Satoshi really is. They've just had this really nice pump and dump, or I don't know if they actually profited from these pump and dumps, if they were the ones that created this, or if it was somebody else that created this sort of price action. Now, usually when we get that pump, which is the final one, it usually results in an exit. Usually these people don't come back in. Most people have realized Bitcoin SV is a scam, but of course, like with BCH, there is a cult following behind it, so these people might keep on buying. They might keep on accumulating, thinking this is the future. So when the newbies come, maybe they find like a really low supply, and that keeps pumping higher. Because remember, although these are forks of Bitcoin, it doesn't mean that all the people that own BCH or BTC went and actually unlocked these coins. They didn't really withdraw them. They just didn't care. It was too low for them. Some of them didn't even know about these things. Maybe some exchanges didn't get these coins, didn't hand them to the users. So it's just a bit of a complex situation. So just a tiny percentage of that supply has actually moved on BCH, and even less on BSV. We shouldn't say tiny on BCH, but it's much smaller on BSV. So what I would say is that their actual market caps are lower than they actually seem, because many of these coins are actually lost, or many people just do not plan to use them ever. So yeah, it's just something that you should be aware of when looking at the market cap and why these coins are able to pump so much. So the smaller the fork, the less people actually took the airdrop, like the fork. They didn't take the free coins that they got. Essentially, the more easy it is actually for this coin to pump. Okay, so that's about BSV. And now I'm gonna go to some older forks. Now there have been more, but the second important fork was BTG, which is Bitcoin Gold. So Bitcoin Gold has had this incredible chart, that very special chart. Now Bitcoin Gold has been deleted from some exchanges. I don't know why it's still listed on Binance, because what they actually did was, back then they gave themselves a ton of coins. I think it was 3,000 or 300,000 or 3 million. It was just a large number. I don't remember exactly. But they took a massive amount that they were supposed to use for development. Maybe they still do develop some stuff because of all the money they got, because they probably don't want to get sued or something. But the truth is that that fork got attacked several times because they tried to use a different algorithm. They tried to use a different algorithm from Bitcoin, at least when it comes to mining. So the key differentiation from, let's say, BCH was that BCH was controlled by Bitmain. So Bitmain didn't really want to control other ASICs. They didn't want to fork the chain and put, like, let's say, an algorithm that it would be hard for them to mine. They would have to create new equipment, or initially just create GPUs to mine with them, to at least get GPUs to mine with them. But they were producing ASICs, so that didn't make any sense. So that was a key differentiation for BTG. The story behind it is that people wanted Bitcoin without the ASIC, so that was its narrative back then. Okay, so it was just Bitcoin free from miner control, nothing special. So when we look back here, that was when the fork wasn't tradable initially, so it was just, you know, essentially futures on some exchanges, maybe Binance, maybe Bitfinex, some of those exchanges. Then the trading started, and then it did chop a little bit, and then it just got dumped, and relentlessly. Like, it probably dropped, like, even from this point, let's say that was the point of the launch, it did drop about, to just see how bad these things can get, guys, with some of the coins, 99%, and I'm not even taking it from the highest point. If I take it from the highest point, 99.7%. So that means that the capitulation on this one has been so large that this move of that coin being up 800% is pretty much not visible on the actual chart. Okay, it is kind of visible, but like, I have to zoom in for you guys to see it. So far, this has been the resistance right here. Now, this actual week on some exchanges did get all the way up to this resistance level. But right now, this is definitely forming an uptrend. This is the first time we've seen this one form an uptrend, guys, where this support was reclaimed. Eventually, we started making higher highs because these were just single pumps. We didn't really get a proper lows and highs, like consequent. Like, I mean, when like each other comes after the other. I can't remember the right word right now, but you know, there was a sequence, okay? But at least back then there wasn't, but now there is. And after such a massive capitulation, when you have something that sounds like Bitcoin and gold, it sounds cool, it sounds catchy, you know, people want to buy the next cheap Bitcoin. That's why essentially many of the altcoins were initially created. That was why Litecoin was created. Again, there was like minor tweaks that made some people think it's cool to buy these things. They start as like little games, but overall, you know, this fork are totally useless in my opinion, except if you want to speculate on them because you are trading based on specific narratives or specific technical analysis. So final one is Bitcoin Diamond, another cool one. I mean, in terms of the name, but it's not really cool on anything else. I'm really surprised again how these haven't been delisted, because I can't really see a point for these coins. They are very insecure because like they can get attacked very, very easily. So that was what Bitcoin Diamond looked like before they actually started allowing for withdrawals, at least some of the exchanges, because initially the chain was so insecure, if I remember correctly, that it was mostly traded on very specific exchanges and withdrawals and deposits were not allowed. So once some of those are allowing deposits and withdrawals, this is what the actual trading started looking like. This day was the day I remember, because at some point I was like, look, I'm just gonna buy some Bitcoin Diamond on some of the exchanges like OKX, because the price was much lower on OKX, and I did expect at some point either Binance is going to delist Bitcoin Diamond or they're going to resume, you know, the deposits and withdrawals. So because the price on Binance was so much higher, if you look at this right now, I'm just going to show it to you guys. So this dump right here was in February of 2018, while this dump is actually on September of 2018. Prior to that, we had these massive spikes on Bitcoin Diamond. So if someone held Bitcoin on Binance, he actually got probably about a 10% airdrop at the time. Okay, that was pretty large. But because it wasn't tradable, at some point, once it became tradable, there was a big collapse, and then it kept falling and falling and falling. So since it started trading properly on Binance, it hasn't had the pump, but the capitulation has been pretty insane, to be honest. So even if I take it from this point right here, let's say the first high it had after the the actual activation of deposits and withdrawals, it dropped about 97%. So again, it's something that's very, very cheap, and especially because the actual supply is much lower than it actually seems, this is something that's very easy to pump, and it could have a very nice spike, because when you have those forks pumping, they form a nice narrative and they all go up together, and they go up quite high because again, it's low supply meeting high demand. People on Binance will start saying, oh, look at this new cool thing, Bitcoin this, Bitcoin that, it's the next big thing, they're gonna buy it, it's gonna moon. But again, if you look at this, and then I'll show you guys the chart on OKX, this is what it actually looks like. Okay, so that was the day that the actual deposits and withdrawals resumed on Binance. So what happened was, this was a really low price. So once people had the opportunity to buy on OKX and sell it on Binance, the gap closed. So essentially it was an arbitrage opportunity that was open for a very, very short amount of time. So Aiden, who started buying back then, he made a lot of money. And finally, the last one I'm gonna mention, guys, is BCHA, Bitcoin Cash ABC. This one is pretty new, and it's a fork of a fork. It's the last one, probably the least relevant fork, because its value is so low. It's like 0.0001 Bitcoin, which is tiny. People didn't even care probably to get that airdrop. It is listed on a few exchanges, not tons of them. It's very insecure, but so far it hasn't really pumped much, and it kept dumping through 2021, which in my opinion could mean that now that it's back above this support level, it could fly. It could literally fly, because again, it has the same properties as the rest of the forks, but with even lower supply, and it is on Binance as well. So of course, just be very, very careful, because right now we might get a bit of a pullback, maybe a larger one, maybe a small one. So far, and every time these things have pumped hard, we have seen a correction, but in my opinion, overall, it's just a narrative that would be nice for people to track. I want to give you guys a little bit of history. I want to give you guys some extra information that I do believe is very, very useful. So in my opinion, it's great to just not be all hype and all that stuff, and there is a need for some substance. Okay, I always enjoy sharing stuff that are hot, that I like, that look good, that can make you money. But of course, I want to have you guys updated and just give you the best information I can. So I hope you like the content. I've gotten some nice feedback. If you have anything negative, please just let me know. These things are raw. I'm not editing anything. Like, it's all me just saying the stuff that I think. I apologize for stuttering earlier. It's a bit late here. So I just, English is not my first language, so sometimes I do mix things up. I do some mistakes. But once again, guys, thanks a lot for watching. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment down below. Anything positive or negative, it's always welcome. And of course, come follow me on Twitter, visit my TradingView page, follow me there as well, where I share more ideas from some of that stuff. I'm just going to show you guys, for example, one last thing, because I did share this thing on my profile on TradingView. Okay, it's the last thing, and I'll let you guys go, because I did have some of these ideas, and some of these are pure gems. So some of them might not be interesting to you guys because you don't have, let's say, a Binance account, or a KuCoin account. But for example, here I had that funny thing where I was like, Bitcoin Diamond Hands baby for Bitcoin Diamond. I shared this idea right here, and I did mention a lot of the things that I was thinking, okay, why I had that thesis about Bitcoin Diamond. And look at this, beautiful, straight away in profit. That's why I always say, come on my Telegram channel where I post updates, where I share a lot of my thoughts, on Twitter as well. Come follow me on Telegram, because you'll get the updates very quickly, because again, I cannot do all the stuff on YouTube. There are more things I have to do in my life rather than making videos, because they take some time to think about the things I'm gonna talk. They take more time rather than just me sharing a quick idea. I need to be better prepared, things have to be quiet. So again, and I cannot make tons of videos because I don't want to be occupying my laptop just uploading stuff. So once again, thanks a lot for watching, guys. Hope you liked it, and I'll see you on the next one.